Find the lowest common denominator with prime factorization. Computations are facilitated when the lowest common denominator is used. The term lowest common denominator is defined as the smallest whole number that can be divided evenly by all denominators within the problem. One way to find the least common denominator is to use their prime factors. For example, we want to find the least common denominator, or LCD, of the fractions 7 over 10 and 5 over 12. So we're going to use this method to find the least common denominator of 10 and 12. So we're going to start by finding the prime factorization of each number. Okay, so the first step is, again, we're looking for the LCD, least common denominator, between 10 and 12. And that's what we're looking for. So we want to be able to find the prime factorization of each number. So if we take a look at the number 10, if we break that down into prime form, we can see that these are factors. The prime factorization is 2 times 5. And then for 12, we know that we have 2 times 6, which then becomes 2 times 3. So the prime factorization of 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. Now, once we find the prime factorization of each number, then we're going to write each number as a product of those primes, which we did. And then we're going to match the primes vertically when possible. Okay, so what I mean by that is the following. Okay, so if you notice here, I wrote down 10, and the prime factorization is 2 times 5. And then for 12, the prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 3. So what I've done is I put them in order so you can see what's happening here. Now, we're going to bring down the primes in each column. And so what I mean by that is, if you take a look at the 2 with the 10, it also shares a 2 with the 12. So they have a 2 in common. And then they also have, the 12 also has a 2 that we need to include. The 12 also has a 3 that we need to include. And then we have a 5 that needs to be included. Now the LCD is the product of these factors. So therefore, we would then say that the LCD between 10 and 12 is the following. 2 times 2 times 3 times 5, which is 60. Okay, now notice that the prime factors of 10 and the prime factors of 12 are included in the LCD. And so by matching up the common primes, each common prime factor is used only once. And this ensures that 60 is the least common denominator. Okay, now how to find the LCD using the prime factors method. Step 1, we want to find the prime factorization of each denominator. Step 2, we're going to write each number as a product of primes, matching the primes vertically when possible, and then we're going to bring down the primes in each column. So let's take a look at this first example. In this first example, what we want to be able to do is we want to find the least common denominator between the two denominators of these fractions. You have 2/3, so we have 3, and then the other denominator is 12. Okay, now if we wanted to write this in prime form, we know that 3 is already prime, so that's the prime factorization for 3. For 12, the prime factorization, we can break this down to be 2 times 6, and this is 2 times 3, so therefore this is 2 times 2 times 3. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to write each number again as a product of primes, and then I want you to notice here what's happening. Okay, we have 3, and the prime factorization of 3 is 3. Prime factorization of 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. So if you notice, we have a 2, so we bring down a 2, we bring down another 2, and then you can see that they have 1, 3 in common. And so therefore, you can see what happens with the LCD. The LCD between 3 and 12 is equal to 2 times 2 times 3, which is 12. Okay, now we don't have to go through this entire problem, but if you notice one thing, if you notice that 3 is a factor of 12, then we already know that the LCD is 12. So another way of saying this is, since 3 is a factor of 12, we can see that the LCD between 3 and 12 is equal to 12. Okay, now let's take a look at example 2, 1/2 and 3/8. So again, the first thing is that we can say we want to be able to find the LCD between 2 and 8. Okay, now we should already be able to see what the LCD is just from here. Is 2 a factor of 8? You would say yes. So we should get an LCD of 8. But let's just break this down into prime form. Okay, we know that 2 is already in prime form. And we know the prime factorization of 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So now let's go ahead and then write these problems vertically. So we know the prime factorization of 2 is 2, and the prime factorization of 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So we bring down what they have in common. They have 1 2 in common. They have another 2. They have another 2. So therefore we get the LCD to be 8. And then again, as you can see here, that the LCD of 2 and 8 is going to equal 8. And so therefore we can say the following. Since 2 is a factor of 8, then the LCD of 2 and 8 is equal to 8. Let's take a look at this last example. We have 2/7, 5/14, and 1/28. So what we want to do is we want to find the least common denominator between all three numbers. 7, 14, and then 28. Now again, if you take a look at this, is 7 a factor of 14? The answer is yes. Is 14 a factor of 28? The answer is yes. Since 7 and 14 are factors of 28, then we should be able to know that the LCD is going to be 28. But again, let's just break this down into prime form to prove that. So we know that 7 is a prime number. Okay, let's break down the prime factorization of 14, which is 2 times 7. And then the prime factorization of 28 is 2 times 14. And so therefore this becomes 2 times 2 times 7. So now let's look at this. Take a look at what this looks like when we write this in a vertical format. So we have 7, 14, 28. The prime factorization of 7 is 2. The prime factorization of 14 is 2 times 7. And the prime factorization of 28 is 2 times 2 times 7. So you can see that all three of them have a 2 in common. So we bring down the 1, 2. We also have to bring down a 2 from the 28. And they have 2 7s in common between 14 and 28, so we bring down the 7 there. So therefore, when we multiply that all out, we can see that the LCD between 7, 14, and 28 is going to equal 28. And again, as I stated before, it says here that since 7, 14 are factors of 28, therefore the LCD is 28.